For the month of July, we've been focusing on the environment. And this week, we're going to make that personal. That is, we're going to focus on our immediate environment. We usually take our immediate environment for granted. We don't necessarily stop and think about it, much less consider our immediate environment from a spiritual or a wholeness perspective. But our immediate environment has a direct impact on our sense of peace and our ability to perceive and to experience God. A big part of being a follower of Jesus Christ is to tend to our spiritual growth and to make life more fulfilling and more loving in the process. Our surroundings obviously have a big part of that, or are a big part of that. Our surroundings on earth, our environment, can be divided up in a number of ways. For example, today I'm going to divide it up by how much control we exert. Our closest inner circle, I'll call our intimate space. This is where we have the greatest control. Our intimate space is our most private and personal areas, such as inside of our homes. Next is our personal space, the area that we carry with us, the small area right around us that joins us everywhere we go, no matter the space we're in. When somebody else is in our personal space, they can reach out and touch us or hug us or stand very near us. Now, after our personal space, we have what's known as our social space. This is the environment where we meet our friends, the space where we know most of the people by name. The social space is the environment where we spend time with our friends and extended family. And then finally, the public space, where we encounter those we don't know. The public space includes everyone else. The person in the car in front of you that just made a right turn after having the left blinker on. The people we encounter while shopping. The people we don't know at all or that we know in a very superficial way. We have the least amount of individual control over public spaces. So, do you know how to manage or improve each of these spaces from a spiritual perspective? Consider that Jesus Christ himself engaged in all these areas. That gives us some examples we can use. For example, the social space is where Jesus introduces communion. And it's where Jesus did much of his teachings for his disciples. To this day, social space is where most churches operate, particularly smaller churches. We have a fair amount of control over our social spaces. We choose what a church to attend. We decide who our friends are, hopefully in a positive and intentional fashion. Ideally, we choose a church that helps us grow spiritually, one that provides space for love, for justice, and for peace. Jesus also withdrew sometimes from the crowds, from his disciples even, to be alone, to be in silence with God. Find many examples of Jesus going to spend time in his own intimate space, time alone on a mountaintop, to pray away from his followers. It's one of the reasons we know that we believe that silence and meditation are important to our spiritual growth. At each level, public, social, and intimate space, we can often make improvements, adjustments, to improve our lives in significant ways. It starts with an awareness of what to look for, and it takes a certain level of self-awareness as well. We also need to realize that some people may not experience these different kinds of spaces the way we do. For example, those of us who are neurodivergent or on the autism spectrum can mistake one space for another, leading to awkward or difficult situations because, for example, they may not sense personal space in the same way that we do, that we would. Young children naturally lack the ability to understand the different nature and different expectations of each kind of space. So some of us need to start there, just starting with being aware that there are different spaces, each with its own rules and ways of being. Once we are fully aware of each type of space and how each space works in our life, our next challenge is to develop our own boundaries. Boundaries are one of the ways that we control spaces to ensure our peace and our ability to walk with Christ. For example, we might have a boundary in our intimate and also in our social space regarding alcohol, for example. We set the boundary first by removing any alcohol from our space, and then by informing others who are going to be in our social space with us of our boundary so they can respect it. If someone shows up to our home or to an event with a bottle, the bottle can't enter. If the person insists, then they can't enter, assuming it is a space that we control in that manner. This protects our space and ourselves in useful ways. Of course, once we leave our intimate space and our social spaces, that boundary becomes difficult or impossible to maintain. We can't expect people we don't know, who are in spaces we don't control, to honor our boundaries. In that case, though, we can still protect ourselves and our boundaries by removing ourselves from spaces that violate our boundaries in unacceptable ways. Boundaries keep things out of our space that are damaging to us. To maintain healthy spaces, we need to know our boundaries. And to be at peace, we need to communicate those boundaries effectively within our intimate and our social spaces. Boundaries change from person to person. Right? A boundary might be no talking about politics, right? Or no anti-LGBTQ bigotry, or no swearing, or whatever. Just make sure that our boundaries are real, important, and worth the effort to maintain, because there is some effort involved here. Once we have our boundaries well established, the next thing to consider is our senses, and to some degree our intuition or our hearts. We experience much of the created world with our senses and with our intuition. By stopping and considering each sense and how our senses impact us in each of these typical spaces, we can make huge improvements to our individual environment that can help us better focus on God. When dealing with our individual environment, the first question we need to ask is this: what does this environment focus me on? Does it focus me on God? Does it focus me on my spiritual path? Does it improve my ability to love? Or is this space distracting me from God? Is this space encourage me to waste time on unimportant things, or worse, to waste time on things that cause anxiety, on things that cause us to be fearful, or that bring us regret? These are important questions to keep in mind. If we're not aware of these things, then we are likely taking our spaces for granted. Is the environment around me helping me to move towards God and towards love and towards good health? Or is it moving me away, distracting me, or worse, causing damage? When we step into any space, we can quickly check our overall feeling. Does this space feel healthy and loving or not? Is the air clean and pleasant to breathe? The overall feeling, though, that we get, I'm calling intuition or heart. It's usually the first thing we check as we strive to become more aware of our surroundings. Our general gut feeling about a space is often helpful, but a lot of times more detail is needed. If the space doesn't feel right, why not? To answer this question, I suggest focusing your attention on the present moment, paying close attention to each of your senses individually. For instance, you might start with your visuals. What are you seeing? Is the view beautiful or pleasing? Does it make you feel connected and loving? Or does the artwork, the architecture, the clutter cause you to feel the opposite? Does it cause you to feel disconnected, anxious, fearful? And what do you hear? Are the sounds you're hearing harmonious and making you feel appreciative of life, or are you hearing noise, loud, disruptive, and disturbing sounds? In our intimate space and sometimes in our social space, we can impact these things in very positive ways. Do you fill your personal space with music that's uplifting? Or do you fill your personal space with TV, the news, and social media? TV and social media are not generally helpful, but they can be. Also remember that even online, these kinds of spaces also exist. Right? There are online equivalents of intimate, social, and public spaces on the internet. Have you ever seen someone post something publicly that should have been posted in an intimate space instead? If what you're doing on TV or the computer helps you, for example, if it gives you useful knowledge, it changes how you feel in positive and loving ways, that's probably okay. But if watching TV or other media causes you to be angry, to lose faith in others, or to see the world in disconnected and unloving ways, then change the channel or turn it off. We have an internal compass, most of us do, that will lead us into better spaces, better situations, better social, and even better public spaces, once we learn to discern and make adjustments. Now, most of us are attuned more to some senses and not as much to others. So we need to deal with the senses that impact us the most individually, which is different for each person. Some churches use incense, for example, to create a pleasing smell that reminds people of God. And this can be very powerful, very helpful for some people. I remember I had a visitor at my old church once. Walked in. This place doesn't smell like a church. Ew, yuck. I said, what? What are you talking about? So it turned out we didn't burn the incense that this person was accustomed to. In our church tradition, smell is not something that we pay as much attention to as some other traditions do, as long as it's within certain limits. Managing our own personal environment is not complicated, but if we take it for granted, we can overlook how much control we have in each space. How much control we have to use music to help center and calm us, to use smells in productive ways, to use visual art and other art in ways that bring us peace. Each of our senses is different with different challenges and different dimensions, but each of them can be impacted in positive ways if we pay attention. The spiritual strategy here includes an ability to draw our attention, and this is important, to draw our attention into the present moment. It is the present moment where our senses operate. It is the present moment that we occupy spaces. It is in the present moment where we find God. God is not found off in the future. God is not off in some faraway place like heaven, will we hope to get to someday? No. That's not how Christ taught his disciples. God is right here and right now. God exists in all the spaces we inhabit in the present moment. We experience creation, which, by the way, what is creation? Creation is an outpouring of God, and we experience that through each of our senses in the present moment. What can happen is that we can get distracted by our environment, distracted in or by the spaces we occupy, distracted so badly that it can make God seem distant, unavailable, certainly disconnected from us. In addition to our sense of connection to God, this stuff actually impacts our overall well-being as well. When scientists and public health experts talk about these sort of things, they sometimes refer to them as the environmental determinants of health. The idea that the conditions in the environment where people are born, live, work, play, and age affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. For example, if there's pollution where you live, you're more likely to experience certain diseases. Or that people with more access to green spaces, to parks, to nature, tend to feel less stress, which contributes to having better overall health. Now, someone may not have the means, or for whatever reason, they can't move out of an unhealthy home or neighborhood. But for most of us, there's a lot we can do to improve our personal environmental health. Focusing on our environment through each of our senses is a step towards cleaning up and uncluttering our spaces in positive ways. And ideally, we get to the point that we pay attention to each sense sufficiently that it all ties together for us in a holistic way. That we feel each space in our hearts and know how to make each space into a place of love and connection. However, if you've never paid much attention to your environment, this can seem like maybe too much too fast. So start small. Start with those spaces you have the most control over, your intimate space and your social space. For example, create a space for spiritual growth within your intimate space. So a way to practice this. It's also an important approach in general. Creating a space to be with God. Do you have one of those already? I mean, besides the church. Do you have a private and personal space that you have designated as a space you can use as part of your spiritual growth effort? A place to pray, to be in silence, to meditate? If not, I urge you to do this, to try it if you haven't already. Create a small private space for yourself in your own home or maybe your yard or your garden, just for the purpose of learning about spaces and about how to transform spaces into places of spiritual empowerment. It might be as simple as placing a cross on the wall, or maybe burning some incense or other means to create a smell that brings you comfort. Seeking God seems like a long and difficult effort for some of us, some of the time. Maybe, I don't know. But it starts out small. It starts out in our intimate and social spaces, and it starts in the present moment. So if you think you're going to smart this tomorrow, you might have missed the point. On the other hand, if it's tomorrow, it's tomorrow. Tomorrow will be now, eventually. Yeah, there's some paradox here. It's a learning process to intentionally use our surroundings as a tool for growth, to intentionally use every aspect of our lives as a tool for spiritual growth. Really looking at kind of two main things. First, to make us more aware of God in our midst. The more we are aware of God in our midst, the more we will act in love, and the more that we'll be likely to make good decisions. Because we know God is with us. And then the second thing, once we become aware of God in our midst, is to discover and pursue our calling, our reason to be alive in each moment, our reason to exist in each space. Sometimes our only reason to be in a space is to exist, is to be, is to experience love. But other times there's other things as well. And we can use this awareness and these techniques to improve our environment in ways that help us experience a more loving and connected existence in all our spaces. We certainly don't need to limit it just to the church. To experience life in such a way that we can sense the direction that the winds of love are blowing and act accordingly. This was the experience of connection that was demonstrated by Christ, and it is available to us all through the grace of God, that we may use our eyes to see and our ears to hear and our senses to feel and experience that God and that love is always around us, here and now and always.